What's going on, party people? This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. Coming to you live once again from my son's home state of Tennessee. He's chilling here with me again today. And he just wanted to give everyone a shout out and tell them that Syracuse men's basketball stinks. And that's unfortunate, but maybe that's true. Hey, Syracuse women's basketball up to 16-3. That was a pretty freaking sweet win over Stanford, a perennial really excellent program. That was on Sunday. And we did Syracuse basketball on Monday. So today's Tuesday. Happy Tuesday. This is Syracuse Central. We talk about football, basketball, and recruiting in both sports. Please drop me comments about what you like and you don't like and hit that subscribe button. Syracuse men's basketball is back at it on Wednesday against Virginia Tech at home, but we're going to do some football-related stuff today. Primarily some portal stuff and just some other stuff related to the staff, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to ask y'all something. So I think I'm from the DMV. I'm from the Baltimore area. I lived a lot in DC, but anyway, the Ravens are one of my teams. And so Jim Harbaugh got fired. Now he's with the Giants. Fine, great. But then on Monday, Sean McDermott got fired by the Bills. And I root for the Bills unless they're playing the Ravens because they're, a Western New York team. I went to Syracuse for college. And it's like, I know that they've been kind of like, they haven't gotten to a Super Bowl with Josh Allen. And then in the playoffs this year, they got knocked out in a rough one against Denver. And, Mahomes wasn't in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson, you figure maybe this is Buffalo's best shot. And McDermott, I don't remember his overall stats, but he's won a bunch of division titles, and I'm pretty sure he's been to at least one AFC title game. But yeah, I get it. He hasn't been to a Super Bowl, and it's like, what have you done for me lately? I don't know. I was like, what? He got fired? Really? Anyway, that has nothing to do with Syracuse football. Do you think he should have gotten fired, though? Drop me a line. All right, so we're going to get into we haven't talked about Syracuse football and like some portal stuff lately. And so, and maybe you've seen it elsewhere and that's fine. But I just wanted to give you some of my thoughts about a couple of recent developments. So one was, it was interesting because Fran Brown had said at least once, maybe more than once, that the plan for his quarterback room in 2026 would be Steve Angeli, the incumbent starter. We all know he got injured and hopefully he'll be back to full health. Redshirt junior, take a medical redshirt this year, so he should have 2 years left. This past year, that is. And then Zaid Lott, the incoming freshman from Charlotte, and then 2 transfer portal quarterbacks. Well, we know about we knew from a little further back about Amari Odom from Kennesaw State. And then on, I think it was either Thursday or Friday, first reported by 24/7 Sports, I confirmed it with a source of mine. Danny Lauter, a senior at Georgetown. Georgetown, what? So, that's 2 transfers right there. And then we don't know what the deal was, at least when I taped this, about Rich Bellin, the freshman from New York City. Some of the other freshmen or younger guys transferred out, but I haven't seen anything about him yet. And the portal did close on Friday, although with the holiday weekend and everything, stuff could leak out, later this week. And then you've got freshman Joe Filardi, who was obviously on scholarship for the lacrosse team. So, figured maybe the quarterback room was done. Nope. Good Lord. This came out of, I was kind of surprised by this. So, Malachi Nelson, a redshirt sophomore at UTEP, I believe he'll have 2 years left. He committed to Syracuse football. That was per his agent. He has the same agency representing him as Calvin Russell, and I think Fran Brown as well. And so when I talked to a source over the weekend, the source told me that Nelson is planning to compete for the Orange starting quarterback role. I'm not saying he's going to get it. I still think it's going to be Angeli, but between him, I certainly feel like the Georgetown guy and the 2 freshmen, they're not, necessarily going to contend. But you got Angeli, and then I could see Nelson and Amari Odom both contending with Angeli. So we'll see. Look, Nelson started at Boise State, then he was at USC, then he was at UTEP. This is a whole issue. It's so ridiculous. And I'm not hating on Nelson, but it's so ridiculous these guys can play for 12 different teams in college. But whole nother issue. So look, in the 2023 recruiting class at the high school level, and I get it, it's the prep class and it's 3 years ago. He was not only a 5-star player, he was the number 1 overall prospect, not just the number 1 quarterback, the number 1 overall prospect. Let that sink in. And I get that recruiting rankings don't really matter, especially 2-3 years later. But the number one national prospect in the whole class, okay, and he went to Los Alamitos High School in Los Alamitos, California. So he didn't have a great. UTEP stunk this past year. They were 2-10. He completed just about 55% of his passes. He played in 6 games, just under 1,200 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, 9 picks. Not really super highly rated in the transfer, national transfer rankings from either 24/7 Sports or On3. Look, again, this is like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like you're taking a shot, so to speak. It's like low risk, high reward potential, maybe. Like, if it doesn't work out, like you're not expecting him to be the starter. But like if he, turns things around, so to speak, working under a new quarterback coach who I'm going to talk about in the next segment. And then obviously Jeff Nixon, the OC, and, Fran. Yeah, like having Nelson and Odom backing up Angeli. Yes, please. Yes, please. I'll take it. What do you think? Drop me some comments. All right, speaking of that, so this also came out in recent days, but I know I had done some football, or excuse me, some basketball stuff lately. So, but I did want to talk about this because I think it was a really good hire. So, SU Athletics officially announced that Sean Ryan is going to be Syracuse's quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator for the 2026 season. It had been Nunzio Campanelli, but then he went to coach the tight ends in like November. That's when Fran announced that move, and then Michael Johnson, who's the co-offensive coordinator with Jeff Nixon as the offensive coordinator. Johnson moved from coaching tight ends to QBs, but then Nunzio left to be the OC at UConn. Michael Johnson, according to the Syracuse Athletics Department website, is back as a co-offensive coordinator coaching the tight ends. And then we've got this new quarterbacks coach / passing game coordinator in Sean Ryan, who is like no joke. I mean, he's from Hudson Falls, New York. He's got nearly 3 decades of coaching experience, 18 seasons in the NFL. He was on the staff of Tom Coughlin, who played at Syracuse and was great. When Coughlin was the head coach of the Giants, the New York Giants, and they won 2 Super Bowl titles. It was in 2007 and 2011, and they beat New England in both Super Bowls, if I remember correctly. And so Ryan's interesting, though, because he's obviously well known for coaching a lot of really good quarterbacks, but he's coached, been an assistant on both sides of the ball. He's coached quarterbacks, he's coached wide receivers, he's coached linebackers. I could go on and on and on, but teams that he's coached, the Giants, Carolina Panthers, Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, at the college level, he's worked at South Carolina as an offensive analyst, working with the quarterbacks. He coached the running backs at Harvard. He's worked at Columbia, Boston College, Colgate, Albany, and Siena, some New York schools. He played at Hamilton College as a defensive back and outside linebacker at Hamilton College in Clinton, New York. So, he's got New York roots. And most recently, by the way, I should have mentioned that before coming on board at Syracuse, he was the senior defensive assistant and coached the outside linebackers for the Miami Dolphins. And so, look, I think this is a really good hire. He's a proven assistant working at the highest level, coaching some really excellent quarterbacks. And so, as I've talked about and some of you all have commented about, I feel like this coaching staff that's been brought together maybe has more of a pedigree than the prior staff. And there's some guys that are still there, but more pedigree, more experience in terms of coaching and player development versus not just recruiting. And recruiting is important too, don't get me wrong. But guys like Nick, and I'm not saying Nick Williams wasn't a good coach or Elijah Robinson, but they're also known as elite recruiters. And so I feel like Fran maybe is taking a step back in terms of them being, these guys being elite recruiters, so to speak, and focus more on player development. But they, Fran Brown is still an excellent recruiter. Other guys still excellent recruiters, but this is a great hire. One other guy to mention is, I don't think it's been officially announced by Syracuse, but Football Scoop noted not too long ago that Syracuse is expected to hire Bowling Green special teams coordinator Alex Bayer in the same role at Syracuse. And he's got some nice nice resume as well. He's worked at the college level for 10 years. He's worked at Wake Forest. He's worked at Bowling Green, Valparaiso. And Bowling Green this past season a freshman running back, Cameron Petaway, was named a freshman All-American as an all-purpose player. He led the nation. His kickoff return average was 33 yards, which is insane. Their place kicker, Jackson Cleather, at Bowling Green, that is, he was a semifinalist for the Lou Groza Award, 19 of 22 on field goals. And that's the same award that our man Andre Schmidt won back in, I think, 2018. So, this looks like a good hire as well. So I feel like they've filled out most of their staff. Off the top of my head, there might be one or two more to go, but I like it. I like it so far. So, we'll see. Okay, so this next one. So Ole Miss, good old Ole Miss, who was one of like the feel-good stories of the college football playoff because, Lane Kiffin bolted, and I wish he would have coached his team, but he bolted, and based on the calendar and recruiting calendar and everything else in the portal and everything else, he ended up going to LSU and did not coach. And then Ole Miss still made it to the semifinals of the college football playoff, which was pretty cool. And so in recent days, amid the portal, closing, but guys, still committing to schools, and that'll be the case moving forward this week and beyond, probably. Both Jonte Cook II and Darrell Gill Jr., former junior wide receivers at Syracuse, and I believe they're two top production wide receivers in 2025. They both committed to Ole Miss. And so I saw articles that maybe Syracuse coaches suggested that Jonte Cook hit the portal, but I think they tried to keep Gill. I don't know that for sure, and I don't like to speculate, but anyway. And then this came across, and I think Mike McAllister, 24/7 Sports. I'm sorry, his colleague. Mike had a story on it, but Matt Zenitz, who's with 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports, and gets scoops all the time on the transfer portal stuff. He reported over the weekend, I believe it was on Saturday or Sunday, that Michael Smith, who had committed to Syracuse. He's a tight end at South Carolina, committed to Syracuse like in the early parts of the month. And then there was all this scuttlebutt that like he wanted to go back to South Carolina and the Orange wasn't willing to release him from his contract or whatever. But then it sounded like they were, and he was going to end up going back to the Gamecocks. And then over the weekend, it was reported that he was flipping. So he flipped from Syracuse, where he was committed for like 2 freaking weeks, to Ole Miss. So Ole Miss got 3 of Syracuse players, and my headline for this segment, hey Ole Miss, stop taking our player. I mean, I'm saying that tongue in cheek. Everyone takes everyone's players. I don't care, and I'm rooting for Ole Miss because I think Lane Kiffin is a bonehead. But it just was kind of ironic. But both of those wide receivers, and I don't Cook, like I don't want to spread rumors, but like, at least from what I've heard, maybe there were some issues like in terms of cultural fit. I'll just leave it at that. Gill kind of hurt. That was kind of a bummer. And Syracuse brought in a bunch of wide receivers, but not a lot of them are proven. So, I'm a little concerned about the wide receivers room, even though they've got a lot. They've got a lot of them in terms of quantity, but I don't know the quality yet. You've got Amari Goff, Calvin Russell, incoming freshman. You've got Darian Williams, Darius Johnson, Tyshawn Russell. And then you've got some of these other guys they got out of the portal, but like not a lot of them have done a lot of stuff in college. And Gill and Cook, obviously had some stuff go on in the past at other schools, but Gill was pretty good receiver the last 2 years. But anyway, hey, listen, go Ole Miss. The whole Michael Smith thing, I got nothing. I wish nothing but success for him, but I think it's ridiculous that, he transfers to Syracuse and then 2 weeks later he tries to go back to USC reportedly and then ends up flipping from Syracuse to Ole Miss. It's just ridiculous. So speaking of that, and I think that this is a larger issue, but there was an interesting piece by David Hale in ESPN, who's like one of their top ACC reporters, along with Andrea. God, I'm totally blanking on her name. She's such a nice lady too. I'm totally blanking. Andrea Adelson, really nice lady. And David Hale, by the way, is really funny on Twitter. You should follow him. But he talked, and he's an SU alum, I'm pretty sure, just full disclosure. But he talked to John Wildhack, and Wildhack talked about all this stuff. He talked about collective bargaining. He talked about media rights. He talked about the recruiting calendar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the long and short of it is Wildhack says there needs to be a lot of changes, because there's so many things in flux. You've got the portal, you've got rev share, you've got all these coaches leaving before the season's over, you've got media rights and certain leagues dominating other leagues with, revenue, television revenue. You've got eligibility stuff. Are they going to do the 5-5? Are they going to do, I believe the coaches approved that you could redshirt if you play fewer than, less than 9 games in a 12-game regular season, which is ridiculous. So it's like, he was like, basically said there just needs to be a lot of changes. And one thing that he talks about that I'm going to focus on here before we wrap up is collective bargaining and all that. And, the issue of making these athletes employees and having ironclad agreements with, these legal documents where it's just, there's no issue. There's no vagueness. There's no controversy. It's like an ironclad document. There could be, it's a contract about revenue share. It's a thing where, if a guy wants to move on, there could be buyouts and all that stuff. But like everyone needs to be held accountable. The conferences, the schools, their athletic directors, their presidents and chancellors, the teams, the athletes, the agents, like every stakeholder, like everyone needs to be held accountable, and everyone needs to get on the same page. Third-party NIL is all over the place. It's ridiculous. But Wild Hack, one thing he said in the story by Hale is there needs to be collective bargaining. The players should be getting paid, no question about that. But with collective bargaining, there's rules that have been bargained for. It's a legal document that everybody has obligations they're required to uphold. That's where we need to go. I 100% agree. And I also think it's ridiculous, because in basketball, I think I talked about this on Syracuse Central not too long ago. They just moved the portal till right after the national championship games on both the men's and women's side, and they also reduced it to 15 days, which I'm fine with. But right now in football, it's from the 2nd to the 16th, and the national title games 3 days later. So the problem is that if the national title game's on the 19th or around the 20th, and then, you want to start it the next day and then make it 15 days for everyone, like most schools or what school hasn't started their spring semester at that point? But like, I don't know the ins and outs of the rules. Like, do they have to be like, I guess if they want to sign on with that team and be able to do spring practices, then they would have to be there by the last day to register for classes for that spring semester. If they're like fine with just like, starting up over the summer or whatever and being there for fall, but like then you're not getting winter workouts, spring, practices, the spring game, summer workout. Like when do you get there? And then you're there just for summer workouts and fall camp, and like and you just have to be there by the time, the classes start in the fall. But I don't think that's as ideal. The coaches are going to want the players there for spring practices. So I know the recruiting calendar is like hard to fix, but they need to line it up so like these coaches aren't leaving early. And it's like in a perfect world, after the national title game, do they move up when the title game is, like not have as much space in between? They got to have at least a week. But then they got all these bowl games, half of which none of them mean anything. But like part of it is at the end of the regular season is, or the championship, games is like early December, I feel like. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'm too lazy to look up right now, but when are the first round of the college football playoff? Like seems like there's a lot of space in between there. Maybe shrink the space there. I don't know. It's not perfect, but they need to get this, figured out in terms of collective bargaining and making them employees or whatever they're going to do, just so that these agreements are ironclad and there's no tampering or there's less tampering. There's not all these freaking lawsuits between players wanting to sue the NCAA for eligibility or schools suing a player for backing out of a deal. Like it's just nonsense. Like I know it's a big business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. So is college basketball, between the men's and women's games. But all this stuff, all these legal things, all this nebulous crap everywhere, it's a bunch of crap. So, I'm not like best friends with John Wildhack. There are a lot of people that want him gone and want Entree gone and, whatever. But like, I agree with a lot with what he's saying. So check out David Hale's article. It was interesting. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. I'm your humble host, Neil Adler. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Tell all your friends. My son, Kathan, says hi. He says Syracuse is, they're okay. He's like over in the corner there. He's like, whatever. But we really appreciate you. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm sure my son will give me constructive feedback afterwards. Probably tell me to stop wearing a hat every time. But this is a lot of fun, and I appreciate everyone's support. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We will get more. We'll probably get into basketball on Wednesday because they have a game that night. But we'll certainly be keeping tabs on the transfer portal, coaching moves, recruiting in both sports. You tell me what you want to hear about. Thanks, friends. Take care.